Welcome and good morning to the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Flint. I'm Sue Owen Kinsey, today's worship associate and a member of our church. And I would like to welcome everybody that's visiting us on cyberspace. Welcome to you if you're a member and a long-time visitor. Welcome to you if you're a new-time visitor. We get asked questions about UUism. And one of the questions is, what do you believe in? Well, there's many things we believe in. One of the things we don't have, though, is a creed. We don't have a list of what you have to believe in and what you can't believe in, but we do have beliefs. And one of my favorite beliefs is that we are here to make this place better for those that are here now and those that come in the future. If you are visiting us on a Sunday, we're going to have a Zoom coffee hour at 11:30. The code will show up on the PowerPoint, and if you'd like to come and have a discussion about today's service, to learn more about UUism, or just have a conversation with some friendly people, please join us. You have to make your own coffee, though. Our ministers are the Reverend Lynn and Jerry Kerr, and our pianist is Jennifer Howard. Now, we have some announcements. One is about UU Vote. Jerry Kerr, our minister, is searching for 10 people who are willing to call or text people to make sure they vote. So far, he has 7. The list of people to be called is carefully composed by our own Michigan UU social justice networks, and this will involve 4 to 5 hours of time. Please email Jerry and help with this very important work. Also, on Saturdays, open air, pandemic approved, noon meetings are being well attended and a lot of fun. All of our remaining meetings will be taking place here on our beautiful grounds, and a robocall and our e-updates will provide even new details. Just remember to bring your own chair and a lunch if you'd like. And we are grateful for the gifts of time, talent, and the treasure that support our congregation. And we will gratefully accept your online offerings through our website, www.uucf, to help us continue our presence as an open and accepting liberal faith community. Offerings can also be mailed to the church address. And remember to click like if you're on our Facebook, so this will help more people find their way to our services and to our congregations. And now to begin the service, Jennifer will start the prelude. We light this chalice on behalf of all who bear the name Unitarian Universalist. If you'll join with me now in reciting our covenant, recognizing the richness of diversity, the beauty and wonder of shared worship, and the transforming power of love and service, we gather as a sacred, intentional community to freely seek knowledge and truth and to celebrate the fullness of life, and by our actions increase goodness and justice.
Today is a new day, and this can be our do-over day. Shake the dice again. Pick another card. Give it another try. The past week is gone, if you decide it is. Tough week at work? Monday is a new day, if you don't live in the past. Test grade a little low? You can do better on your do-over. Its time will come. Said something mean? It's never too late to say you're sorry when you get your chance on your do-over. Not good enough to yourself? Schedule in a nap for tomorrow. Bad habits are erased by thoughtful do-overs. Made a bad play? Forget it and do it over. The ball will come to you again. Forgot to say, I love you? Say it twice tomorrow on your do-over day. Today is a brand new day. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. Give it another try. Pick another card. Shake the dice again. And let us welcome this brand new do-over day together.
Let us join in a spirit of meditation. This meditation is from J. Donald Johnston. We cannot love because we ought to. We cannot hope because we ought to. We cannot believe because we ought to, or because we want to, or because we're taught to, or because it's reasonable, or desirable, or possible for someone else. We can only love and hope and believe, sometimes or often, not quite or almost, seldom or never really, because we have this community in here and a world of hurt out there. Blessed be.
Our reading today is an excerpt from a sermon by the Reverend Gary Smith. The senior minister of First Parish in Concord, Reverend Gary Smith, was discussing the long history of Unitarian Universalism and of his own church. Lynn was one of the ministers there and was present the day he gave several examples of their longevity, such as the first time he stood in front of the congregation and he said, "Everyone who can, please stand up. Now, sit down if you have been a member here for 5 years or less, 10 years or less, 20 years or less." There were still many people standing. He went all the way up to 60 years or less, and there were still several people standing. He said he was dumbstruck. He was again reminded of the long existence of the congregation when he spoke of Ralph Waldo Emerson's grandfather, William, who had been a minister of the church. He said Emerson attended church for some time, so tourists take pictures of it. We are only one of a handful of churches that stand right on Concord's Main Street, not on a side street or a back street. This is the meeting house. This is where the fourth graders in our public schools come to learn about town meetings. They sit there, as did our forebears, and debate the need for a new bridge or a bounty on crows. The Reverend Smith continued. At a retreat, one of our leaders spoke of how intimidating this history can be, especially for a minister. Here, we talk about being founded in 1636, 363 years ago. This led to his final recollection. I applied for an American Express corporate card for the church a couple of years ago. A person on the other end of the line was taking down information, address, phone number, officers, number of years we've been in business. 362, I said. There was silence on the other end of the line, and finally a response. I'll need to go get my supervisor.
Olympia Brown was the first woman minister whose ordination in 1862 was recognized by a denomination. In 1920, as she looked back on her life's work, she spoke these words: "Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it. There's nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. Do not demand immediate results, but rejoice that we are worthy to be entrusted with this great message, that you are strong and you can work for a great, true principle without counting the cost. Go on finding ever new applications of these truths and new enjoyments in their contemplation." Now, I know plenty seminarians, especially women, who were inspired by these words to become UU ministers. Brown spoke them just 10 years before our congregation was formed. But I believe the message is as relevant today as it ever was, and not just for those of us that have made ministry our career. Stand by this faith, work for it, and sacrifice for it, Brown said. That's quite a demand. But in her next sentence, she tells us why. Be loyal to this faith which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which has comforted us in sorrow, strengthened us for noble duty, and made the world beautiful. I believe that our 7 principles that affirm and promote values such as acceptance, democracy,
personal growth, peace, social justice, and a respect for the interdependent web of all existence are lofty ideals. They are not all easy to achieve, and there are those who might fight against them. But our noble duty is to try to share these values with others and to help make the world better. Or in Brown's words, beautiful. Furthermore, Brown recognized that our faith also comforts us in sorrow, and she said we should rejoice that we have this great message to share. She then encouraged us to find new applications of the truths we find and enjoy thinking about our faith. Well, that's what I'd like to do today. Think about how we might find new ways to apply what we know about Unitarian Universalism to encourage others to value themselves, one another, our world, and our earth. Now, we live in a time when many don't trust the government, schools, neighbors, even friends. The animosity that began with the last presidential election and then heightened with the coronavirus and then with police brutality that now seems almost a weekly occurrence, the meaning of civility has been altered in our country. Hatred and sanctioned violence are on the rise. UUs around the country are almost beside themselves. And we do all the activist things that UUs do and have been doing for centuries. But civil society is almost crumbling around us. And we say, what can we do? Maybe it's stand by your faith. Work for it and sacrifice for it. We are good and compassionate people. And from where I stand, if we can get more people to hear our message, perhaps it could make a small difference. As ministers, Jerry and I are often asked, is there a simple way to tell others who we are? Because most people don't have an hour to spare for a dissertation on our origins of Unitarian Universalism or the 7 principles. And we don't have the luxury of a one-sentence description that some religions do. Christians can recite something like John chapter 3, verse 16, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life." If you're Jewish, you might tell someone, "We believe in a single omnipotent God who is the center of the universe and creator and the source of moral law for humanity." And Muslims might say, "God is your Lord, and there is no God but him, the creator of everything, so we worship him, for he is responsible for everything." Now, I respect the people that have these beliefs, but I cannot immediately see how they are working for great and true principles that make the world better, as Olympia Brown would put it. If you want people to live noble values, as we believe we should in our religious tradition, how do we tell someone how to do that in an uncomplicated way? Well, we can, as I said, memorize our 7 principles. And while they are beautiful and true, that's difficult and hard to share succinctly. We can send them to Facebook or to our website. Or we can try to articulate in our own words what we're about. Now, I've taken classes and I've taught classes about this, and I've been a minister for 23 years, but that's still a hard thing to do. But I got an idea while I was looking through a box of memorabilia from my son's grammar school days. He made this culture box in the 4th grade. And the kids decorated these boxes and put items inside that symbolized their cultural origins. My son Rowan put things in his box that represented his Polish heritage, like the Polish English dictionary that my dad used, my grandmother's teacup, and a hand-carved jewelry box from Krakow. It was a popular project not only for the children, but all the adults who helped them. And since Unitarian Universalism has such a rich history and many symbols, I thought a UU culture box could demonstrate what's important in our faith tradition and to me. By using objects that represent our values, perhaps your mind, too, will be stimulated to think of things that will help you encapsulate the message Olympia Brown implored us to share. Now, you're probably not going to create an actual box, but since it's a demonstration today, I actually did create one. So the first item is not going to be a big surprise. It's a chalice. Now, the chalice can represent many things. It looks like the Holy Grail to some, or a communion cup. And many religions use a flame as a feature in their celebrations. We often refer to the warmth of human community and the light of truth when we refer to our chalice. But the chalice itself was not commonly used until the 1980s. The chalice primarily reminds me of what I consider a central UU tenet, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. You see, the chalice was first the official symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee, or USC, and it later, of course, became the UUSC. The USC was in part inspired by the work of Reverend Waitzel Sharp, who was one of our former ministers, and Martha Sharp, his wife, who helped people escape the Nazis in the early days of World War II. Later in the war, the USC continued the work, and the executive director met an Austrian artist in Portugal. The cartoonist had drawn rather unflattering pictures of Hitler and had to flee to Portugal to save his life. The artist was asked to create a symbol that could be used on all USC documents to make the organization look official and also recognizable and convey a religious and political authority when dealing with other governments. Knowing that a communique was from the USC was a matter of life and death at times, as some of their work was done in secret, and there were barriers such as language, religion, and nationality. The chalice that they created was adopted in 1941. I see the chalice as a symbol of inherent worth and dignity because the USC commissioned it to help those in danger, no matter who they were or what they believed. It was recognized as a welcoming place of safety. I believe it continues to signal to others that here there is no economic, religious, racial, ethnic, or sexual discrimination. Next, reason is important to the UU faith, and I symbolize it with this Bible. Our religion and intellectual struggle goes back to the earliest days of Christianity. Just 2 centuries ago, Unitarians and Universalists were wholly defined as Christian, and today there are still UU congregations that identify as such. Jesus was and still is an important figure. As Reverend Susan Milner puts it, Unitarianism over the centuries was not a religion about Jesus, but the religion of Jesus, centered on the teachings of Jesus and on his activism. Jesus was not so much the end but the messenger, the prophet, who called us to create a more just and compassionate world. Critique and doubt in studying the Bible and theology were essential in the founding of UUism, and the tradition continues. Reverend Gary Smith says that doubts prove we are in touch with reality. People like Henry David Thoreau felt that original thinking such as this was the divinest thing. And there's a story about Frederick Douglass's master, who found that the master's wife had been teaching a young slave, Frederick, to read the Bible. The master was furious and told his wife that if a slave learns to read a Bible, they would become unfit to continue to be a slave. Many years later, and as a free man, Frederick Douglass wrote, "Let the leader reflect upon the fact that in this Christian country, men and women are hiding from people who profess to be religious in barns, in the woods, and fields in order to read the Holy Bible, hiding, that is, from those who claim authority to control its interpretation. The Bible can look dangerously different when you read it on your own." Because our reasoning brings us to all different conclusions, what keeps us together in our UU communities is a covenant to support one another in our spiritual journeys. UUs are encouraged to explore holy texts from all religions and find what rings true for them. This is what fills our congregations with wonderful stories and ideas from all over the world. The next object I share represents compassion, a peace symbol. We treasure compassion as an essential act to show to ourselves and to others, no matter what the circumstances. His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, says, "A truly compassionate attitude toward others does not change even if they behave negatively. Genuine compassion is based not on our own projections and expectations, but rather on the needs of the other, irrespective of whether another person is a close friend or even an enemy." In other words, compassion is for everyone. In an interview, Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh was asked what he would say to the 9/11 attackers. He replied that nonviolence and compassion are the foundations of a peace movement, and therefore he would listen compassionately and deeply to understand their suffering. The Dalai Lama explains compassion this way with a story. He says a person was working under his car. He was having trouble and tried to get up too quickly, and he banged his head on the underside of the car. Then the man got so upset that rather than slowly getting up again to avoid hitting his head, he purposely banged his head on the underside of the car. The Dalai Lama exclaims with delight, "Car not suffer, he suffer, but car not suffer." Anger doesn't help solve much of anything, as we know. But if we have calm and compassion inside, we can achieve calm and compassion on the outside. Only then is peace possible. Another important value is that we are part of the interdependent web of all existence, and I chose a shell to represent that value. For me, nowhere is our connection to the environment clearer than in our oceans. 80% of all life on Earth depends on healthy oceans and coasts. Shells are particularly meaningful to me because they remind me of scuba diving, and diving always made me feel that I was part of something much, much bigger than myself. Albert Schweitzer wrote, "Just as the wave cannot exist for itself, but is ever part of the heaving surface of the ocean, so must I never live my life for itself, but always in the experience which is going on around me." We are seeing right now how climate change is causing massive damage on 2 coasts with fire and water, and Greenland's ice cap, the size of Manhattan, just broke off days ago. These aren't acts of God. These are due to acts of humans. We are part of the land, the sky, and the sea, and only we can save it. And UUs proclaim that truth to the world. I've identified the final characteristic of UUism as justice, and it's symbolized by an old-fashioned writing instrument, a quill. Our tradition calls us to work for justice, and it always has. Whether writing, speaking, marching, or acting outright, American Unitarians and Universalists began many of the first organized social justice campaigns. One such person was Theodore Parker. Parker was perhaps the most controversial Unitarian minister in the 19th century. His ideas about equal rights for women and the abolition of slavery were so radical that he was eventually voted out of the Ministers Association in Boston. Regarding slavery, Parker said, "There are some statutes so wicked that it is every man's duty to violate them." Parker found slavery morally indefensible. He believed that when laws were not ethical, an ethical person does not follow them. Parker wrote letters, did speeches, and hid slaves in his own home. It's said that when he would sit down in the evening at his desk to write sermons, he would have a gun sitting next to him for any slave catchers that might come around. Abraham Lincoln read Parker's anti-slavery writings, and the phrase "of the people, for the by the people, for the people" used in the Gettysburg Address was first penned by Theodore Parker. Although unpopular with many, Parker's work and the work of many others who truly believed there should be liberty and justice for all has helped define our UU faith. The tradition of living out our beliefs was indeed begun by a quill in the hand. So these are the things that I thought should be inside our UU culture box. I limited it to 5 because I had to stop somewhere. A chalice of inherent worth and dignity, a Bible or any religious text we need to use to reason, peace that comes from treating everyone with compassion, the shell that, like us, is part of the interdependent web, and a quill that speaks for justice. But here's the fine point at the end of the sermon. You might want to choose your own objects, because my truths might not be yours. I encourage you to think of a few aspects of UUism that are most meaningful to you, and if you like, associate an item with them to help jog your memory. Mine always needs it. So the next time someone asks about the church that you go to that isn't a church, you might find it a little easier to describe what is admittedly sometimes hard to put into words. Because like Olympia Brown, I believe There is nothing in all the world so important as to be loyal to this faith, which has placed before us the loftiest ideals, which comforts us in sorrow, strengthens us for noble duty, and makes the world beautiful. May it be so.
Our closing words today are from the benediction from the First Parish of Concord, Massachusetts. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. And now let us extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.